One, two, three, testing. All right. Hello, everybody. Hello. All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Suni. I am a person in recovery. I am a person in recovery. I am a person in recovery. Some people can say I'm an alcoholic in recovery. Some people can say I'm an addict in recovery. Some people can say I'm an overeater in recovery. All of that applies. But tonight's video is going to be on step 3. Tonight's video is going to be on step 3. We made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. The emphasis tonight will be, however, on God as we understood Him. Understood, and that stood is past tense. There's a past tense, not as we understand Him, as we understood Him. And notice that when this step came over from Alcoholics Anonymous, it was adapted from Alcoholics Anonymous to Narcotics Anonymous. There was only one word that was added to step 3, and that was the we. Narcotics Anonymous added we. And the reason why they added the we, they said, because we were looking at a collective, the collective. And part of that was in mind was when we were together as a collective, we used that we. And that we had many reasons, from being, where the newcomer might come in and we're saying, doing the readings, or when somebody's talking about a step, they say, well, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Or we admitted that we were powerless over our addiction, that our lives had become manageable. Or we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore sanity. So the we's were always there to insinuate or imply the collective. However, I always take it to another level, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. I don't want my ego to get up there. But I also use the we as mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally, because that's how the addiction and the alcoholism affects the individual. It affects the individual on all 4 levels, and so does it affects the group. It affects the group too, because groups are, number one, addicted. Groups are addicted. All you have to do is find your riot on TV, go to YouTube, put in riot, and you'll watch addiction on a group level as we watch people act out obsessive and compulsive behavior, which is what addiction is and alcoholism is. It's obsessive thinking, and it's manifested in a compulsive or sporadic behavior. So that being said, let's jump right into the topic. I don't want to hold you long, but I will give a warning. This particular topic and how I'm going to approach it may not be what a lot of people want to hear. And if you atheist and agnostic, I would implore you to listen, because I will be referring to the agnostic and the atheist and the valid points that they bring concerning this step that a lot of people, through my experience, overlook. So let's jump right into it. It says step 3, it says we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. And the decision is mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional, and it is confirmed on the collective level. So there shouldn't be too much discussion on that. And it says to turn our will and our lives, our will and our lives. So how does addiction manifest? It manifests in the thinking, our will, and our lives, our physical day-to-day. So we're making the decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care, not over to God, but over to the care of God. And that's as we understood him. Now, here's where it's going to get challenging. It's going to get challenging. Now, when I came to AA some 36 years ago, I was a Muslim. And still is today. I'm not going to drop that. I was a Muslim. And my sponsor at the time, he asked me, well, based on my name, he said, well, you a Muslim? I said, yeah, I'm a Muslim. I'm going to share the short story. I said, yeah, I'm a Muslim, Frank, and this and that, and Ramadan, and 5 prayers. And he asked me a very simple question. He said, well, I see you use, you drinked, and matter of fact, you got some write-ups for it, and you say you used drugs and you lived in the street. And he said, well, was you a Muslim then? I said, well, yeah. He said, well, was you practicing Islam then? And I immediately knew where he was going to. And his point was so that I could see how I understood God. Bam. Do you see where I'm going? We made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him, not understand. And in order to get this step, or to have an effective understanding or an enlightenment of this step, like step 2 says, I had to be honest about the way I believe. In other words, when I came into the 12-step program, I was agnostic at best because of my lifestyle, because of my using to living and living to use, and finding ways and means to get more by however I could. In my intellect, I acknowledge a creator of the universe, the earth, and Adam and Eve, and everything. However, in my will and in my life, that was not the case. I lived in a lifestyle of alcoholism. And what is alcohol? And what is a ism? A ism is what ones practice what they believe. Alcoholism, like Catholicism, like socialism, socialist or socialism. Those are practices, just like alcoholism, addiction. I practice. And even though in my darkest days, I called out to what? I called out to energy that I called God. And I said, God, help me. And I know it's the talks about, my mama's God, my grandmama's God, and, my daddy's God and all that. And y'all went to Catholic school, and y'all was baptized, and y'all took a shahada, and I did all that. But however, my will and my life showed that I lived a life of addiction / alcoholism. That's what I practice. And yeah, every now and then I fell up into the church and sang a couple verses and maybe got the Holy Ghost every now and then. And I took communion, and or when I was at the mosque, I made 5 prayers, and I might have, did Ramadan for a couple of years and a couple Eids and stuff like that. But the reality of my whole situation is this, is that my will and my life was turned over to a destructive force. It was turned over to a destructive power. Remember, in step 2, it says, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And in the NA basic text, it says addiction is a power greater than ourselves, although it's not God. So I was under the influence of a power greater than myself when I'm talking about the addiction and the alcoholism. And that's why in a previous video, I said that the power greater than myself was in no way God. That could be anything that could restore me to sanity. But, however, let me get back on my topic again about the God of my understanding. First, what I must be honest about is how I understood God. And they say, or there's a saying, and I ain't gonna say they say, I take that back. There's a saying that say, you practice what you preach. The saying says you practice what you preach. Now, I practice what I preach. The addict on the street right now is practicing what they preach. The alcoholic is practicing what they preach. The overeater is practicing what they preach. The gambler is practicing what they preach. The sex addict is practicing what they preach. The workaholic is practicing what they preach. All are symptoms of the disease of alcoholism and addiction. That's exactly what it is. And that's turning your will and life over to what? The God that you understood. Because from the time the feet hit the floor to the person went to bed, that's what you practice. That's what you sacrifice for. A lot of us did time in jail. A lot of us lost family and friends. We sacrificed to what? To the addiction and to the alcoholism through our various symptoms. And some of us had more than one symptom. Sunni, why are you bringing this up? Because based on my own experience, and what I'm trying to understand is, how can a person come off the street dripping wet into a 12-step program and all of a sudden have a God, and because you have intellectualized in your mind a few words such as merciful, caring, loving, understanding, you automatically have this God without looking at how you understood God in the first damn place. Somebody please help me out on that. Because it says God as you understood him. In order to come from one place to another place, you must have a start. And that's why I'm willing to say, and I will always say, and my mind will never change, that there's a difference between a power greater than yourself and a higher power. When I came into this fellowship, what my sponsor, Frank, was trying to point out to me was saying, son, you really didn't have no God. You was agnostic at best, but you had some powers. You had some powers that were controlling you. Or that I was under the influence of. And the bottom line, it was called addiction / alcoholism. So what I'm saying to those who have the nerve to listen, most people that step into this program is agnostic at best, let alone the atheist. the points that the atheist and the agnostic have, which I personally believe that gives them a solid foundation for their program, is their admission that they are not believers. However, they understand that it was something, or that there was a power greater than themselves that had them, or that caused them, had them, or they were under the influence of. So this short video right here, is to ask the question to anybody that has the nerve to listen to it and has the open-mindedness and the willingness and the honesty which is required for this step, to say that maybe you are agnostic at best. And I say at best. I ain't saying atheist, but I'm saying agnostic. Now I'm going to switch it around to the atheist and the agnostic. Because you say that you don't believe, what has happened is that same God situation, or your acknowledgement of the God has come through the back door, because a lot of y'all, when y'all sit in meetings, you talk about how you don't believe in it. Sure, you may talk about how the addiction and how the alcoholism may have, that you are under the influence of, and how it controlled your life. But at the same time, you want to knock the God concept. But let's hold it right there, because it's something I want to point out. In the big book of AA, what did they do? What did the founders and them do? They created a whole chapter to who? To the agnostic. And now what's going on in other 12-step programs, even in Narcotics Anonymous, you have the agnostic, you have the atheist. They're creating 12-step programs, and they're taking what? The God word out. They said we're recovering without God. And I won't, but this is what I will say. And here's the challenge. That's how you understand God. Because why would it, and this is the reason why I say that, why would an individual acknowledge something that they don't believe? Somebody tell me that. And I'm saying consistently, if I don't believe in God, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to write about it. If I don't believe, I don't talk about the devil, because I don't believe in the devil. I'm even getting to a point now where there's no good and no bad. It's just what it is. That's where the program is taking me. But anyway, to get off me and to look at this step. So it says, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. So when I talked to Frank, I said, well, Frank, it's telling me to get a God. He said, good orderly direction, son. Just good orderly direction. And work the rest of the steps. So I'm going to jump from step 3, and then I'm going to go all the way up to step 11. And it says, we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him. Now notice, between 3 and 11, there is one mention of God. There's 2 mentions of God. One is in step 5. We're admitted to God. And then the next one is in step 7. we humbly ask, no, excuse me. And then in step 6, we were entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character. And then in 7, we humbly ask him to remove our shortcomings. Now notice there's no God, there's no understanding there. Why? Why? Why is there's no understood? Because what slowly happened is, let me back up a little bit. The God piece, for simplicity, because remember, in both texts, it says what? This God that we understand him is not based on what? On dogma. In other words, we didn't go to no Bible, to no Quran, to no Torah, to no Vishnu, to no any other place where God have already been written down and talked about, and people have been given a concept. In other words, we're not talking about a conceptual God that's based on something that's already been written down, talked about, and so forth. Now we come into a God of our own what? Understanding, based on what? On our own life experiences. Not from some other place. Not a concept based on logic or based on some text, a religious text or a spiritual text, if you will. So wrapping this thing up, as we move on from step 3 to step 7, as we do these inventories, right? Because in 4, you go into the inventory, and then in 5, you're looking at that inventory, and you're looking at what? Your own experiences in life. Then in 6 and 7, we're talking about character defects and shortcomings, what? Principles of our own. Now we're coming to what? Our own understanding based on what? Based on your own life experiences, not based on some that I read. This is what makes the spiritual program a spiritual program, not based on dogma, not based on some type of a religion. And I'm not saying religion is bad. I'm just talking about spiritual concepts. I'm talking about spiritual principles. So let's go back to step 11. When at the time, okay, in step 10, it says we continue to take what? Personal inventory. It says we continue to take personal inventory. Now, the inventory started when? Way back in step 3. Excuse me, in step 4. But step 1, 2, and 3, which are 3 different steps, laid the foundation for step 4. So in step 5, when it says we admitted to God, to ourselves, and another human being, the what? The exact nature of our wrongs. I'm taking responsibility. And this is where the agnostic and the atheist holds firm. This is where the agnostic and the atheist have a foundation, a spiritual foundation for recovery. Because what they have done, if they've taken the dogmatic, and I'll say the dogmatic God piece out, and they've holding on to their response, and they've assumed responsibility for their own actions. But then you might say, Sunni, but in the 5th step it says to God. What? Not all of them, but very few, in essence, have done. They have thrown the dogma out, and some of them have said good orderly direction. And some of them have said they have other excuse me, they have other, they understand that there's an energy that's responsible for our environment. There's an energy that they shoot that there is a direction that they shoot their energy in. That's what I'm trying to say. Now, in the narration, they said we can call it what we want to. And some people, they got already names, Allah, Jesus, Buddha, whatever, doorknob. But that's not the point. But going back to the God of the understanding, my point is this understanding, first you have to come from how you understood to get an understanding. So you coming from your past to where you are right now. I believe that where people have problems in their recovery that result in fatality, relapse, is that the God peace has a lot to do with it. Because some people will take that God under certain circumstances and say, God has failed me. Especially when it comes to money, relationships, money, and relationships, to include jobs, to include death. A lot of people feel like, God, you put a little bit too much on me. God this, God that. Where the atheist and the agnostic, where they don't, quote unquote, believe in God, is quick to reach out to certain things, is just as natural as eating and drinking water. Even if, and I'm gonna show you something, right? So a person that believes in God, they will say, well, God is a he, or God is a she. That's an understanding. That's not an understood. So a lot of times both words are, even though used interchangeably, one is referring to past and one is referring to present. I say that once you get to a God as you understand him, is that when the steps have been revealed to a point where your past has, let me say this, where the resentment and anger and fear has come to a level, let me say, when self-acceptance is achieved to a point where your resentments and your angers and your fears are lessened. That's all I can say about that. So, Sunny, why did you make this video? I'm making this video up because when I sit in meetings, I hear how people is understanding God. How can you understand something you've never seen? Oh, faith, right? Faith, okay. And what is faith? Faith is, to me, it's just the absence of fear. And I know it's a lot of slogans out there, but it's very simply the absence of fear. If you're not afraid, you got some faith. So I'm going to wrap this up. I wanted to talk about step 3 and talk about the God piece. And hopefully, my main point is that when most people come into the recovery process, they're agnostic at best. Those that start from that position, I believe, will have a better understanding of the step process. Yeah. So anyway, I'd like to thank everybody for listening. Come back again. And the name of this show is, the name of this channel is supposed to be Enlightenment Through Addiction and Recovery. And thanks for letting me.